Gorillaz. What can I say about them that hasn't been said already? Legendary virtual band consisting of Murdoch, Noodle, Russell and 2D, run by musician Damon Albarn, who is also famously the lead singer of the iconic Britpop band Blur, and artist Jamie Hewlett. They have released groundbreaking iconic albums over the years since they first formed, such as Demon Days, whose album cover is as widely recognizable as the hits on the album, as well as Plastic Beach, which still stands as one of the best albums of the entire 2010s decade in my opinion. However, since the release of Plastic Beach, we really haven't received a truly incredible album that was even close to being on par with the masterpieces that Demon Days and Plastic Beach were. Humans felt more like a various artists compilation featuring Gorillaz rather than an actual Gorillaz album. The Now wasn't bad, but I'm sure at least half of you guys watching forgot that album even existed until I just mentioned it. Their most recent album, Cracker Island, fails to execute the ideas of pulling the listener into this conceptual fantasy world that they successfully did on Plastic Beach. Plastic Beach is so much more grand and massive in comparison that it makes Cracker Island look like an EP. Song Machine's Season 1 was really the only amazing album they've released since Plastic Beach, featuring a versatile range of fantastic cartoonish tracks and very unlikely collabs that managed to work out so well throughout. But ever since Cracker Island, my hopes for another amazing Gorillaz album were kind of lost until the rollout for the next album, The Mountain, began. To get straight to the point, this is easily the best Gorillaz album since Plastic Beach. It is peak. A pretty big handful of singles were released to build excitement for this album, and many of them completely blew me away and were even better than I initially anticipated. Our first teaser, The Happy Dictator, while not one of the best singles the band has ever released, is such an irresistibly catchy song that it lives up to its title with all the joyous, upbeat vibes and lyrics that seem to be sung from the perspective of the savior leader character, though the tone is intentionally unclear as to whether the leader's promises about bringing happiness into this world are true, and Sparks wonderfully elevates the upbeat vibes, bringing their iconic, magical and highly eclectic sound into the mix. But nothing could have prepared me for how much better and better the singles that followed were going to get. The Manifesto is this epic 7-minute multi-phased song with 3 different sections, I believe, with the middle one featuring a great posthumous appearance from Proof where he delivers this spoken word rap flow. The sections that sit on either side of it are similar to each other but differ sonically and vibe-wise from Proof's part of the song as they go in a Latin rap direction. At this point, I didn't think they would release a single from this album that was going to top the Manifesto, especially since I was slightly underwhelmed by the following single, The God of Lying, but straight after that, Damascus dropped. A song so good that it ended up being in my top 10 favorite songs of 2025. Originally a leftover from Plastic Beach, the song was transformed into a creative and unique blend of dabaka and experimental hip-hop. It features energetic rap verses from Yazid Bey, triumphant vocals from Omar Suleiman, they actually go back and forth, and an earworm chorus from Yasin, which I initially thought was 2D singing, but it's really the dabaka production that makes the track stand out, and it also happens to be the hardest hitting banger on the album. I also love that Starbucks diss. This is really just like a classic Gorillaz moment where Damon gather artists who have absolutely no correlation with each other onto a song and somehow make it sound smooth and great. It's like he spun a wheel to decide which genre he should do when making each track on the album. So at this point, Gorillaz had already teased us with 4 different songs which had already built excitement for me, but right after releasing one of the best songs of 2025, they went and dropped what could possibly go down as 2 of the best songs of 2026 in the middle of January. Songs that transition into one another, The Hardest Thing and Orange County. The first of these features beautiful singing from 2D that's so stunning and surreal that it sort of reminds me of the first half of Empire Ants. The sitar is so gentle that I mistook it for an acoustic guitar when I first heard it. The song then subtly progresses into Orange County, transforming this chill tune into a slightly more upbeat indie pop track with a happy whistling melody while still maintaining the chill melancholic vibes of The Hardest Thing. They combine these heartbreaking lyrics and soft sorrowful singing with an upbeat positive sounding instrumental in a way that works so well, something that Gorillaz also achieved with On Melancholy Hill, and I love Cara Jackson's performance here. Her voice is such a perfect fit for the melancholic yet poppy tune. But going over these heartbreaking lyrics which are centered around the difficulty of having to say goodbye to a friend, I assume they're linked to the theme of grieving loved ones who have passed away, as this pair of songs seems to be specifically about Tony Allen, the legendary drummer of the incredibly influential Afrobeat band Africa 70. Tony was also a close friend of Damon and unfortunately passed away in 2020. This duo of songs would be the last singles Gorillaz released in the build up to this album, making 6 teaser tracks in total if I remember correctly, and in the span of these 6 different songs, the group gave us a more versatile range of vibes, genres and emotions than most musicians do in their entire discographies. So now that I can actually dive into this album properly, it begins with the title track, which is 5 minutes of pure instrumental. It's such a perfect choice not to have an actual vocal performance on top of this instrumental, because this arrangement of traditional Indian instruments from the sitar to the bansuri all comes together to create a surreal and moving experience that truly makes me feel like I'm immersing myself into the world of this album, much like how the beginning of Plastic Beach made me feel like I was being transported through a wormhole into the Plastic Beach universe. But I'd argue the mountain may do an even more successful job of teleporting you into its fantasy world. The music feels like it's meant to play over a montage of scenes slowly dissolving into one another, following the band's journey as they make their way up to the mountain. This is only the beginning of the album and the music is already so adventurous, building immense excitement. It perfectly captures the anticipation and eagerness one feels at the start of an adventure, wondering how it will unfold, to the point where it transcends beyond just music. It genuinely feels like I'm embarking on the journey alongside the band. The Mooncave has an unexpected roster of artists into the mix, from one of hip-hop's greatest legends Black Thought to passionate soul artist Bobby Womack, who has also done some of the most gorgeous moments on Plastic Beach. And while it's not the most heavy verse that Black Thought has ever done, he does a great job at matching the adventurous themes of the album, making this song overall feeling like the white flag of the mountain. And after this we get the run of singles that I've already talked about, but The God of Lying specifically sounds so much better within the context of this album than as a standalone single. There's something about those quirky synths that creates this jungle-like atmosphere that's just so captivating to me, and the chorus 2D delivers on top of it has really grown on me. It's very infectious. The Empty Dream Machine also features the most unexpected mix of people. We get one of my favorite guitarists of all time, Johnny Marr from The Smiths, and Black Thought again on this one song alongside Indian classical musician Anushka Shankar. I love how mysterious the keys sound. They feel as if they're building up to something in an unsettling way. 2D pours emotion of pain over it and seems to be in a mentally confused and hurt state, and in a way this all does build up to something amazing. Following 2D's performance on this track, we get Black Thought's verse, which is arguably the most poetic and lyrically dense moment on the entire album. And if things weren't amazing enough, the call and response song outro ties everything together perfectly like a knot. A part of me does wish that Johnny Marr's contribution to these tracks were more apparent. It's something easy to miss if you aren't paying proper attention, but Johnny's guitar playing does pop out a lot more on the Plastic Guru, which is one of my favorite non-single tracks on the entire album, and the reason it's one of my favorites is partially due to the incredibly addicting chorus, which gets even better when it switches into this choir number towards the end, bringing some Demon Days vibes. And during this chorus, Johnny pours his magic into his guitar beautifully, while still not overdoing it to the extent that it sounds completely out of place alongside the other traditional Hindu instruments in the mix. His guitars are enchanting and lullaby-ish, which goes hand in hand with the motivation and uplifting tone illuminated by the chorus. The Demon Days vibes are even stronger on Delirium, with a crazy electronic beat drop when the Marky Smith shouty and very expressive posthumous chorus comes in, which reminds me of one of Gorillaz' best singles, There. This drop creates an interesting juxtaposition with the verses, where 2D sings soothingly over harmonic gospel background vocals. There's even what sounds like a werewolf howl at some points, and despite how different the mood shift is from the verses, it still fits in perfectly. This crazy run one of highlights still hasn't stopped, because right after the already mentioned Damascus, we get possibly the most atmospheric song on the album, The Shadowy Light, whose vibe makes me feel like I'm on top of the mountain from the album cover, watching the world from above. This feeling is helped immensely by the vocals that Indian singer Asha Bhosle brings to the track. Even though I can't understand the language, her voice alone makes this one of my favorite moments on the entire album, simply because of how uniquely soothing it sounds. The pianos and backing vocals are similarly relaxing, making it easy to get completely lost in the music. This could have been fitting for the closing track as well. Casablanca was the song I was most excited for when the tracklist was first revealed, due to it featuring both Johnny Marr of Smith's fame and Paul Simonon, the bassist of The Clash. I couldn't imagine how a song between these three would sound, but this was not what I expected at all. Having a punk bassist and a post-punk guitarist on a track together, you might expect a rock-tinged cut, but this is hands down one of the slowest and most soothing moments on the album. The relaxing and almost psychedelic feeling that Johnny's guitar gives off is closer to classic Smith tracks like Please Please Let Me Get What I Want, and Paul's bass, while still very quiet, adds quite nicely to the song. The last two songs that follow this also takes a slower, more relaxed approach. The Sweet Prince further explores themes of death and grief, as it is about Damon's father, and the poem he has written here was inspired by Indian culture's views of death, again carrying on the traditional Indian themes. It looks at this tragic event in a more positive light, with the lyrics essentially stating that he is at least in a better place now. And finally, the Sad God closes things off on a pretty depressing note, presenting a realistic view of a troubled society where we have been given the gift of life and some people go and use it to do awful things such as building bombs and just causing destruction in general. With the lyrics being very direct, as if they're speaking to the listener, I assume they are being said from the perspective of the god in the story, as hinted at by the title. The Mountain as a whole is honestly the best Gorillaz album since Plastic Beach. In many of Gorillaz' previous releases, such as Cracker Island and Humans, the ideas going into those records were executed in messy ways, and I also felt the visions for those records weren't entirely clear or even that interesting. When Gorillaz attempted to create another concept album based around a specific world with Cracker Island, it clearly paled in comparison to the adventurous and fascinating world of Plastic Beach. The Mountain is really Gorillaz returning to form when it comes to concept albums, because after a decade and a half, I haven't felt this immersed into a fictional world since Plastic Beach. The idea of incorporating traditional South Asian and Middle Eastern musical influences into the album was a fantastic one and has been executed in pretty amazing ways, and I hope the band continues to fuse other traditional music from other different regions into future albums. It would be exciting to hear a Gorillaz album with some African musical influences in the mix, or maybe some South American influences. I love how distinctly unique this album is in Gorillaz' discography as a whole, and I truly view it as one of their best albums ever. The way The Mountain so brilliantly executes its fully realized world is what I had hoped Cracker Island would achieve. The Mountain focuses on its themes and topics more strongly than Cracker Island ever did. All the features here contribute greatly to the world that Damon was trying to build. There really isn't a bad song on here either. I suppose the singles were better than the deep cuts if I had to be honest, but even many of the deep cuts were still great. By diving into this new musical territory, Gorillaz has given us the most ambitious and forward-thinking album they have released since Plastic Beach, and it just happens to be such a breath of fresh air as a result. Please like and subscribe.